She stood up to the rude customer, not knowing he was a millionaire CEO secretly testing her. In the early morning bustle of a cozy corner cafe in downtown Asheville, North Carolina, the smell of roasted beans filled the air like music. Locals hurried in, half awake, craving their usual comforts. But for 25-year-old Rachel Monroe, the morning shift wasn't just a job, it was a stage. With 5 years behind the espresso bar, she moved like a seasoned musician, tuning her instruments, hand on the steam wand, eyes on the line, mind 3 steps ahead. That Thursday morning, she barely noticed the man in the sleek navy peacoat who entered quietly through the side door. He didn't glance at the chalkboard. Menu didn't even take off his sunglasses. Instead, he stepped to the counter and spoke in a crisp, emotionless tone. One flat white, temperature exactly 144 degrees, microfoam exactly half an inch, strong but not bitter. Rachel blinked. "Should I use a ruler or a thermometer first?" she asked, cocking an eyebrow. There was a pause. A few tired customers chuckled under their breath. The man didn't flinch. "I'll know if it's wrong." That single line could have set off a less experienced barista. But Rachel. She wasn't in the mood to cater to caffeine snobs. She smiled sweetly. "Then let's make this interesting." She got to work pulling the espresso with laser focus. As she frothed the milk, she muttered just loud enough for him to hear. 144 degrees. Not 143. Not 145. Got it. Customers began paying attention. One guy near the window whispered, "This is better than reality TV." She set the drink down with a flourish. A perfect leaf-shaped swirl crowned the foam. The man took a sip, then paused. "Another one," he said, "with less milk." Rachel stared at him like he'd just asked her to make coffee on the moon. But she didn't argue. Instead, she pulled a second shot, made it stronger, and slid it toward him. Again he took a sip. Again he frowned. Rachel leaned in, her tone still calm but edged with steel. "And in this expand, es carried." Here's the deal. The customer isn't always right, but the customer always deserves to know their options. She turned, grabbed 3 paper cups, and poured samples. Strong flat white, one with more foam, one with less milk. Try 'em, pick your match, and let's stop wasting the Earth's resources. Half the cafe broke into applause. The man stared at the samples like a sommelier judging wine. He took a long, considered sip from the 3rd cup. "This one," he said, "balanced, sharp. You knew." Rachel smirked. "Maybe I should put Coffee Whisperer on my name tag." He gave a short nod, paid without tipping, and walked toward the door. But just before he stepped outside, he paused, then turned slightly. His hand reached into his coat and he scribbled something on the receipt. Rachel picked it up after he left. "See you. No name, no tip, just that cryptic note." She held it up confused, then turned to her coworker Jason. "Okay, I just served Mr. 144 degrees. Tomorrow he'll want latte foam in the shape of the Eiffel Tower." The cafe erupted in laughter. But in a quiet corner under the register, Rachel folded the receipt and slid it into her apron. She'd never forget a customer that odd or a morning that strange. Outside, the man walked down the sidewalk, the wind catching his coat. As he passed the cafe window, his eyes flicked to a tiny logo etched into the glass. He smiled, but Rachel. She had no idea she'd just met the man who would change her entire future. The bells above the cafe door chimed with the same cheery jingle they always had. But when Rachel Monroe looked up and saw Mr. 144 degrees walk in again, she nearly dropped the cinnamon shaker. This time he wasn't hiding behind sunglasses or a stiff coat. He wore a light blue shirt with the sleeves casually rolled, his tie loosened just enough to suggest this was either the end of a workday or the beginning of a challenge. He walked up slowly, hands in pockets, posture calm, but with something playfully unreadable behind his dark eyes. "I think he said evenly, I owe you an apology." Rachel crossed her arms. "Oh, someone's ready to admit they're a high-maintenance coffee diva." The corner of his mouth twitched. "Let's go with discerning." He paused, glancing around the quiet cafe. "Look, I'm sorry for being difficult, but you're the first barista I've met who told me the customer isn't always right and still made me want to come back." Rachel didn't smile. Not quite, but her eyes narrowed with intrigue. "That sounds like an apology wrapped in sarcasm." "It's a half-hearted apology," he said with a small shrug. "If I was too sincere, you'd lose the fun of arguing with me. Jason, working the grinder nearby, smothered a laugh. Rachel tilted her head. You're unreal. And yet, here I am, back for more abuse. Their eyes locked just a second too long. Rachel broke it first. What's your order today? Or should I just go ahead and do another tasting flight, save us both the song and dance? He raised a hand in mock surrender. Flat white, hot, 144 degrees. Foam dealer's choice. Rachel snorted, bold, giving me creative freedom. He leaned casually against the counter. You've earned it? As she prepared his drink, Rachel couldn't help herself. So, mystery man, what's your name? He hesitated just long enough for her to notice. Nick Callahan. And what exactly do you do, Nick Callahan? Besides tormenting baristas for sport, I'm in the service industry, he said vaguely. Rachel glanced at him sideways. You critique other service workers. For someone in the service industry. He laughed. Let's just say, I'm always looking to improve the customer experience. She slid the cup toward him. No tape measure this time. But I eyeballed that foam with the precision of a NASA engineer. Nick sipped. His eyes lit up. Perfect. Maybe I should trust you more, he said. Rachel leaned in, and maybe I should tolerate you less. They both laughed. But it wasn't just banter this time. It had rhythm, like two people playing chess, not to win, but to enjoy the match. Nick dropped a 5 into the tip jar. Don't spend it all on a thermometer. Rachel smirked. Maybe I'll buy a ruler, for your foam. He started toward the door, then paused again. You're going to see more of me. She rolled her eyes, but the truth was, her heart beat just a little faster. I'll have a special menu ready for Mr. 144 degrees. As he left, Rachel watched him from behind the counter, brushing her hand absent-mindedly across the note still folded in her apron. Jason leaned in. Tell me you're not actually flirting with the guy who made you do a coffee science experiment. Rachel grabbed a cloth and wiped the counter, playing it cool. Nope, definitely not. He just enjoys being roasted, like the beans. But inside her mind replayed that smile, that name, and the way her pulse had quickened just a little more than usual. Something about Nick Callahan was off, and exactly right at the same time. The invitation had arrived on a Wednesday. Cream-colored, thick-stock, gold-embossed letters that spelled the Callahan Foundation Annual Winter Gala. Rachel almost tossed it, thinking it was another corporate mailer, until she saw the handwritten note on the back. Free food, free wine, you deserve both. Jason had scored extra passes through a friend who did catering. It's fancy he'd warned, but you clean up good. So, now standing at the foot of the grand staircase at the Magnolia Heights Hotel, Rachel Monroe was anything but a barista. She wore a midnight blue cocktail dress, her curls pinned back heels just high enough to feel powerful, but not ridiculous. Even the scent of the place, cedarwood and soft vanilla, felt rich. Inside the ballroom glittered crystal chandeliers scattered golden light across marble floors. Waiters in white gloves passed champagne like it was soda. Rachel sipped cautiously, eyeing the room. She didn't belong here. Not really. Then the lights dimmed and a velvet voice echoed from the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our host, founder of Callahan Enterprises, Mr. Nicholas Callahan. Rachel nearly dropped her glass. Mr. 144 degrees stepped into the spotlight, tailored black suit, sharp as glass eyes scanning the crowd with smooth authority. No freaking way, Rachel muttered. Jason gawked beside her. Wait, that's your latte guy. Rachel couldn't answer. She was too busy reeling. Nicholas, stood confidently at the podium, talking about social impact, local business investment, all while radiating the kind of calm charisma you couldn't fake. Then his eyes landed on her. He didn't look shocked. He looked like he'd been expecting her. When the applause faded and the crowd scattered back to cocktails and networking, Rachel bolted for the balcony. The winter air bit into her bare shoulders, but she needed to breathe. A few minutes later, the door clicked. You didn't finish your wine, Nick said softly. Rachel spun around. You're a CEO. He stepped closer. Surprised? Try utterly blindsided. I didn't lie, he said. You asked what I did. I said I was in the service industry. You also demanded foam thickness, like you were inspecting a rocket launch. He smiled. It was a test. Rachel blinked. Of what? My barista skills. My patience. Customer experience, he replied. I bought your cafe's parent company 6 weeks ago. I wanted to see what it was really like on the ground. Her stomach twisted. So, the latte flight, the sass, all of that was part of your experiment. No, that was real, he said, voice gentler now. You're sharp, fast, honest, and people trust you. I want that for our next phase. She crossed her arms, guarded now. So this is a job interview at a hotel balcony. Nick shook his head. This is me asking if you'll help lead something bigger. Build a new line of cafes, keep the soul intact, but with more reach, more impact. Rachel looked out over the city lights. The wind tugged at her hair, and for a moment, the only sound was a distant saxophone from inside. And if I say no, she asked. Nick's gaze never wavered. Then I'll keep showing up, ordering 144-degree lattes, and wait until you change your mind. She laughed despite herself. You're relentless. I'm patient. She turned to him fully still, unsure whether to run or lean in. You came into my cafe acting like a coffee snob, and I left a little more impressed than I expected. Rachel bit her lip. This wasn't just a flirtation anymore. It was something strange real, and dangerous in the way all big changes are. She didn't answer him that night, but she didn't walk away either. And when he held the door open for her, letting her back into the glowing ballroom, Rachel took one step forward. The rest she'd figure out later. Monday morning in downtown Asheville dawned crisp and impossibly blue. The kind of day that made people believe the whole week might actually go well. But for Rachel, Monroe nerves thrummed beneath her blazer like static. She stood in front of a towering glass structure, Callahan Enterprises HQ. The reflection of the rising sun shimmered across its sleek surface. In her hand, she clutched a pale gray card with sharp lettering. Welcome to the Expansion Initiative, 18th floor. Jason had all but shoved the blazer at her that morning. You're not just slinging lattes anymore. You're running with suits. Look the part. Rachel had rolled her eyes, but she wore it anyway. Inside the building was silent but alive. Polished marble floors, soft amber lights, elevators that didn't ding obnoxiously. When she handed the card to the front desk, the guard smiled and said, Mr. Callahan's expecting you? The 18th floor opened not into a maze of cubicles, but into something Rachel hadn't anticipated. A café. Not just any café. An upscale replica of her own bean and birch shop. Brighter, sleeker, polished wood counters and brass fixtures. At the center stood Nick Callahan, dressed in a crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled steaming milk with confident ease. He glanced up with a crooked smile. Told you I could make a decent flat white. Rachel approached slowly. Is this your idea of onboarding? Nick poured the milk, swirling with practiced finesse. I worked barista shifts in college. I like to start people where it all begins. He handed her the drink, 144 degrees, foam, close enough. Rachel took a sip. She hated how good it was. I didn't come here to be impressed, she said flatly. Nick smiled. I know. That's why you're here. He gestured toward a glass-walled room at the far end. Let's talk business. Inside the conference room, a folder sat waiting. On the cover, Expansion Project Bean and Birch, next chapter. Enormous on board. End por. We want to open 20 new locations in the next 18 months, Nick said. But not just copy-paste stores. We want to keep the essence, what you helped build. The warmth, the honesty. Rachel flipped through pages, floor plans, staff training outlines, menu concepts. It was overwhelming and ambitious. She looked up. You're offering me what exactly? A 6-month trial, Nick said. You'd oversee pilot operations, help shape the culture, make sure we don't lose the soul in the scaling. She frowned. And what makes you think I won't fight you every step of the way? Nick leaned back unbothered. Because I want you to fight me. If everyone in the room agrees with me, I miss what matters. Rachel sat in silence, staring out at the city skyline beyond the glass. She'd been comfortable at the cafe, known, grounded, but here everything buzzed with possibility and risk. Nick slid a paper across the table. Salary. Her eyes widened, but she didn't react. Are you buying my silence or my stubbornness? She asked coolly. Nick grinned. Neither. I'm buying your honesty. Rachel leaned back, heart pounding. I'll try. 6 months. That's it. Nick extended a hand. Deal. And just like that, her world shifted. She was no longer just Rachel the barista. She was Rachel the operator in training, the brand builder, The one with a say? Later that afternoon, Nick walked her through departments design logistics, even a coffee lab where baristas tested beans like scientists. At each stop, Rachel absorbed details, asked questions, challenged assumptions. The best coffee, Nick said as they watched someone pull a cold brew sample, isn't the one with the most flavor. It's the one that makes someone feel heard. Rachel gave him a side glance. Did you just turn a beverage into a TED Talk? He laughed, guilty. They ended the tour back at the in-office cafe. Nick leaned on the counter, arms crossed. I'm glad you said yes. Rachel looked at the floor, then at him. I didn't say yes. I said try. Fair enough. She turned to leave, the elevator doors opening with a soft chime. But as they closed behind her, Nick stood there, still smiling. She was no longer part of the crowd. She was at the table, and for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like just a barista. 3 weeks into her trial, Rachel Monroe was already finding her rhythm at Callahan Enterprises. Mornings started with espresso from the office cafe, her fingers still moving like a barista's even in a blazer. And days rolled into brand meetings, strategy sessions, and spreadsheets filled with projections she never thought she'd understand. She surprised herself. She kept up. She even led a few training calls with branch managers. And Nick, he kept his distance, mostly, except when he didn't. He had a habit of showing up right before lunch with a coffee in hand. 144 degrees, of course, always claiming it was for employee morale. But Rachel wasn't stupid. She saw the glances from coworkers, the raised brows, the whispers that faded just as she entered the room. Still, she ignored it, at least until the branch visit proposal landed on her desk. Road trip, Nick said, dropping the itinerary on her desk with a grin. Endiset stuff, betspastov. Rachel scanned the plan, 3 regional cafes, 2 days overnight in Moss Creek, a quiet town halfway between Asheville and the Georgia state line. You're taking me on a business trip, she asked cautiously. You're the one overseeing the pilot stores. We need your eyes on the ground. Right. Totally normal for the CEO to chaperone the newbie. He smiled. I don't chaperone. I observe. Rachel didn't say yes immediately, but she didn't say no either. By the time they pulled onto the highway in Nick's sleek black SUV, she'd convinced herself it was just work. They visited Hickory Hollow first. Clean layout, great staff, but poor lighting. Rachel made mental notes, complimented the team, suggested a layout shift. Next was Silver Bend, where she tasted a cold brew so acidic she nearly choked. She gave polite feedback. Nick listened, nodded scribbled observations without arrogance. You really don't pretend to know everything, she said at one point. I pretend enough to stay employed, he quipped. By late afternoon, clouds began to roll in. Radio reports mentioned a small thunderstorm heading their way. As they neared Moss Creek, the sky opened. Rain poured like a warning. They arrived at the Willow Inn windshield wipers, struggling against the downpour. Inside, the receptionist gave an apologetic smile. Only one room left, 2 twin beds. Nick looked at Rachel. Book it or sleep in the car. Rachel exhaled. Book it, but I'm taking the bed furthest from the door, and you better not snore. The room was quaint, soft yellow lighting, wooden walls, rain tapping at the windows. Rachel kicked off her shoes, towel-dried her hair, and muttered, "This business trip just turned into a weather hostage situation." Then she looked over and burst out laughing. Nick was pulling a French press and a bag of ground coffee from his suitcase. "You brought your own coffee. Never trust motel brew," he said. "And besides, the best coffee is the one you share." They sat on either side of the small round table, the air thick with the scent of dark roast and rain. They sipped, traded stories, laughed, and when Rachel reached for the curtains and accidentally tripped on the charger cable, she stumbled. Nick caught her, hands on shoulders, inches apart. Time slowed. She stared at him. The air was charged, like the storm outside. He didn't move, didn't speak. Rachel broke it with a smile. Trying to catch me or take my temperature? Maybe both. They laughed. But something had changed. Later, as they lay in their twin beds, music playing softly from her phone, one shared earbud between them, Rachel stared at the ceiling. If every business trip was like this, she whispered, I'd never want to go back. Morning came with a gray sky and one big surprise. Outside the inn just across the street, someone snapped a photo of them leaving with their suitcases. Rachel didn't think twice, but Nick saw and said nothing. By the time they returned to HQ, the photo was already in the company group chat, captioned with nothing but a coffee emoji and a winking face. By Monday morning, the whispers weren't just quiet anymore. They were loud. Monday mornings were never Rachel's favorite. But this one, it came with whispers sharp enough to cut. She stepped off the elevator, coffee in hand, heels clicking against the marble floor of the 18th floor. Eyes followed her. Phones tilted downward as she passed. Conversation stalled, then resumed in hushed tones. The photo from Moss Creek, her and Nick walking out of the inn, suitcases in tow, coffee cups in hand, had gone mini-viral inside the company's Slack. It wasn't just office gossip anymore. It was speculation. Rachel kept her chin up, but her stomach twisted. She hadn't asked for this. She hadn't done anything wrong. By the time she reached her desk, Nick's assistant Morgan was already there, holding out a phone. "You should see this." Rachel stared at the blurry image on the screen. The caption, "Morning brew with the boss." Her jaw clenched. "I swear to..." Morgan held up her hand. "Don't shoot the messenger." Rachel inhaled sharply and headed to the break room, needing a moment alone. But of course he was already there. Nick Callahan looking utterly unbothered, casually stirring his coffee. "You've seen it?" she asked flatly. "The photo," he replied, sipping slowly. "Yeah, and you're not doing anything." He set down his mug. "I am firing people?" she asked, half joking, half hoping. "Nope." He reached for the milk steamer. "I'm making you a cappuccino." Rachel blinked. "You're serious?" "I want everyone to know I value talent." He said, "Talented employees get coffee delivered by the CEO." She folded her arms. "You're fueling the fire." Nick smirked. "No, I'm controlling the narrative." 5 minutes later, he placed a cup on her desk, heart-shaped foam facing forward, and said loud enough for nearby desks to hear, "For our top operator, she runs on precision." The murmurs started immediately. One male colleague whispered, "That's a first." "Mr. Callahan playing barista." Another laughed. Rachel leaned forward and hissed, "You're turning me into the office soap opera." Nick whispered back, "Drama needs an audience. Let them talk." He walked away, leaving Rachel with a heart in a cup and heat rising in her face. By lunchtime, the whispers had evolved into full-blown theories. They totally knew each other before she joined. "No way I heard she impressed him at the cafe. I bet he's just obsessed with her coffee." She sighed, pushing her lunch tray across the cafeteria table where Morgan joined her. "Is there any way to shut this down?" Morgan shrugged. "Only if you two start dating. Then it's old news." Rachel glared. "You're not helping?" That afternoon, she stepped into a strategy meeting. Expansion, timelines, location, scouting budget reviews. And who should slide into the seat next to hers? Nick. He didn't care who was watching. When the discussion turned to design concepts, Nick turned to her. "Rachel, what's your take on both layout and customer flow?" She answered professionally, keeping her tone even. When he poured her a glass of water mid-meeting, a few managers exchanged glances. She noticed. She felt it. When the meeting ended, she didn't wait. Rachel marched into his office, shutting the door behind her. "Do you know how many comments I've had to dodge today?" Nick looked up from his laptop. "A few dozen." "This is not funny. I didn't say it was... I want to be here because I'm good, Nick. Not because people think I'm your office coffee crush." He stood and walked around the desk, voice calm but serious. "Then keep doing what you're doing. Let your work speak louder than gossip, and I'll keep making sure your voice gets heard." She stared at him, angry, frustrated, but not completely unmoved. He handed her a folder. "Moss Creek branch report. We meet on it tomorrow." Rachel took it, hesitating at the door. She glanced back once and caught his eyes lingering just a second longer than necessary. She wanted to stay mad, but somewhere between his defense and his coffee with heart foam, it was getting harder. The fluorescent lights in the 18th floor boardroom buzzed faintly as the team filed in. The presentation screen glowed bright blue with one bold title, Bean and Birch Summer Campaign. Fun, fast, flavorful. Blake, the company's head of marketing, stood beside it, pointer in hand and confidence oozing from every thread of his fitted suit. Rachel Monroe sat 3 seats down from Nick, flipping open her notebook pen, already in hand. Blake launched into his pitch. "We're targeting Gen Z and millennials with colorful drinks, Gummy toppings, whipped cream towers, rainbow sprinkles. It's Instagram gold. Slides flashed across the screen, bright pink lattes with edible glitter ice drinks crowned with flaming marshmallows. And then came the kicker. Prices slashed 25% for launch. TikTok ads, mini games, influencer kits. Rachel's pen froze. She raised her hand. Nick nodded slightly, giving her the floor. Do we have data showing our core customers want drinks that look like dessert buffets? Blake's smile tightened. Based on other brands, this visual forward trend boosts foot traffic by 40%. Rachel tapped her notebook. But Bean & Birch isn't other brands. We're known for clean flavors, low sugar, and authentic bean profiles. A few murmurs of agreement echoed around the table. We sell trust, she continued, not candy in a cup. Blake crossed his arms. Rachel, with respect. This is about growth, evolution. She didn't flinch. Growth without identity is just noise. Customers come to us because we don't chase fads. Nick leaned forward, watching her closely, expression unreadable. Rachel took a breath. Instead of toppings, why not offer seasonal tasting flights? Bean origin showcases, latte art workshops. Still fun, still shareable, but aligned with our values. Blake scoffed. That's slow. We'll miss the summer window. Rachel stood her ground. Better to be late with something real than early with something fake. Nick finally spoke. Cost comparison. Rachel answered without hesitation. My plan is 30% cheaper. No price slashing, no sugar inflation, less risk to the brand. Blake stepped forward again. But it's not fast. We're looking at weeks of A/B testing. Nick nodded slowly. I hear you both, he said. Blake's plan gets speed. Rachel's protects the brand. So, we test. Rachel blinked. You're splitting the rollout. We'll run Blake's campaign in 75% of the stores. Rachel's in 5 pilot locations. Nick replied. Rachel froze. Her jaw clenched. Then I can't support the launch, she said clearly. If we dilute our message, we lose trust. I won't lead something I don't believe in. A heavy silence dropped over the room. Blake looked triumphant, Rachel defiant. Nick didn't speak for a beat. Then he said simply, your decision. Rachel closed her notebook, tucked it under her arm, and walked out. The room held its breath. Nick stared at the door long after it shut behind her. Later that afternoon, his assistant Morgan found him still at his office window. She left the building, she said softly. Said she needed air. Nick nodded. Let me know when she's back. But when hours passed and she didn't return, he grabbed his coat and left. Oh, he found her exactly where he suspected, behind the counter at the original Bean & Birch, wearing her old apron, hands moving fast, smile faint but intact. Your regular's here, her coworker teased, pointing behind her. Rachel turned. Nick stood by the counter. Give me what I had that first day, he said. She arched a brow. Flat white, 144 degrees, foam, half an inch. He shook his head. Give me what you think is right. For the first time in days, Rachel's defenses softened. She nodded. Steam hissed. Milk swirled. She handed him the cup. Warm, bold, honest. He sipped, eyes never leaving hers. Are you angry? I'm disappointed, she said. You didn't give me the chance to prove my case. Nick nodded. I rushed, and I nearly lost you. Rachel stayed quiet. Then finally, I'll send you my test plan. 5 stores, 4 weeks. Nick smiled. I want to do it your way. She gave a soft, knowing look. Then we're good. But no more cappuccinos with hearts on my desk. No promises, he said. And just like that, the fight wasn't over. But they were, again, on the same side. Saturday mornings at the Edgewood branch of Bean & Birch were always packed. Strollers bumping into chairs, college students writing poetry they'd never publish, and parents clutching double-shot lattes like lifelines. Rachel Monroe stood at the register, breezing through orders like a conductor in rhythm with her orchestra. 2 vanilla oat lattes, 1 drip dark roast, and 1 matcha, half sweet. No foam, she recited, tapping the screen. Next, but just as she reached for a cup, a sharp clunk echoed behind her. Everyone turned toward the espresso machine, the beating heart of the cafe. The barista at the station frowned. The machine just cut out. Rachel moved fast, Checked the pressure gauge. Nothing. Steam hissed weakly and died. "Try restarting," she said quickly. Nothing. A red warning light blinked ominously. She checked her watch. 11:16 a.m. Peak hour. A line out the door. A single error, and Yelp would roast them alive. That's when Lena, her assistant shift lead, rushed over. 2 one-star reviews just dropped. Someone said the coffee was weak. Another said it was bitter. Rachel's heart thudded. She took a deep breath. "Okay, don't panic," she said, clapping her hands for attention. "The espresso machine is down, but we're not closing." Staff looked at her confused. "We're switching to manual brewing. I want pour-overs French press and AeroPress stations set up in 5 minutes. If you're not familiar, follow me." No one argued. Rachel turned the cafe into a crisis clinic. 2 people were sent to pastries, 2 on cold drinks. The remaining baristas clustered at the bar as Rachel walked them through grind sizes, water temp brew timing. While kettles boiled, she dragged a round table into the center of the cafe and scribbled on a chalkboard. "Coffee measured by heart, free today." Then she stood tall, looked out at the long line of waiting customers and said, "We're giving out free cups. You tell us what you like, and we'll make you something honest." At first, some customers huffed, annoyed. But once they tasted the Ethiopian pour-over, things began to change. One student started live streaming the chaos. Another tweeted, "Crisis turned coffee school, measured by heart bean and birch magic." Rachel quickly posted an update on their local cafe's page. "Espresso machine down. Apologies for earlier drinks. We're offering free manual brews today. Come try something new. Coffee, measured by heart." Shares skyrocketed. Within an hour, regulars returned, some with friends in tow. "This reminds me of Italy in the 80s, one older gentleman said after sipping a French press. "No machines, just real coffee and time." Rachel smiled. "Then maybe we didn't break anything today. Maybe we went back to our roots." By 3:45 p.m., the backup espresso machine arrived. A technician installed it, ran a test shot. Rachel pulled the first espresso herself, tasted it, and nodded. Applause broke out across the cafe. 5-star reviews began flooding in. Unexpected coffee adventure. Felt like a masterclass, and it was free. Warm, bold, honest, just like they said. As the staff caught their breath, a familiar figure stepped through the glass door. Nick Callahan, no suit, no assistant, just a quiet expression and a familiar rhythm in his stride. He watched silently as Rachel handed a customer a perfectly crafted pour-over. She didn't see him at first, too busy making magic. He finally stepped forward, holding out a cup. "Wonder if you accept coffee from customers?" he asked softly. Rachel glanced up her face, surprised but calm. If the customer knows how to listen, they'll always be served. Their eyes locked. He didn't say anything more. He didn't need to. In that moment, watching her lead a team through what should have been a disaster, seeing strangers stay longer because the atmosphere had shifted from transaction to experience, Nick knew. He didn't just respect her, he was in love with her. It was a quiet Sunday morning when Rachel found the note. Tucked into the handle of Bean & Birch's front door was a cream-colored envelope with her name written in that same firm, slanted handwriting she'd seen on a receipt months ago. Inside was a single line. "Meet me where we first met. NC." Rachel stared at it for a long minute, heart racing. Part of her wanted to crumple it up, throw it in the trash, and move on with her Sunday. Another part, well, that part had already started tying her hair back and reaching for her keys. The original Bean & Birch was just as she remembered it, warm golden light, the faint scent of roasted beans and waffle cones, and the steady hum of conversation. But it was quieter today, calmer, like it was waiting. Nick Callahan sat at the table by the window, the same one he'd commandeered with his ridiculous coffee order on day 1. He wasn't in a suit, no power stance, just a soft white button-down sleeves rolled and an open look in his eyes. On the table sat 2 cappuccinos, unfinished. Beside them was a small silver milk frother and a steel pitcher. Rachel approached slowly. "If this is a job interview round 2, she said, crossing her arms, "I'm out." Nick chuckled. "No interviews, no tricks. This is something else." He picked up the pitcher, poured the milk with careful precision, and with a practiced tilt, swirled the foam into a soft heart-shaped design in one of the cups. He slid it toward her. The first time I met you, I challenged you. This time, I just want to ask something simpler. Rachel eyed the cup, then him. What's this? He leaned forward, no smirk, now no clever lines. Just the quiet seriousness of a man who had taken too long to say what he felt. Try and see, he said, if being with me is as bitter as espresso or as sweet as cappuccino. For once, Rachel didn't joke. She didn't hide behind sarcasm or quick wit. She simply picked up the cup, looked down at the heart, and then slowly raised her eyes. I only pour coffee, she said, voice soft for people who know how to listen. Nick met her gaze squarely. I'm ready to listen, even to the things you haven't said yet. She thought of everything that had led to this moment. The latte flights, the fake order tests, the rooftop gala, the photo that nearly unraveled her, and the way he stood silently watching her rescue an entire cafe from disaster. It wasn't just about love. It was about respect. Then, Mr. 144 degrees, she said, a teasing warmth finally returning to her voice. Be prepared to drink coffee for the rest of your life. Nick grinned, and before he could say anything more, she leaned across the table and kissed him, slow, quiet, the kind of kiss that settled like heat in your chest and didn't need to be rushed. When they pulled apart, she whispered, let's see if you can keep the temperature steady. He laughed. With you, I'll keep it at exactly 144 degrees, for life. She shook her head, still smiling. Later, as they left the cafe together, the staff pretended not to notice. But the soft thud of high fives behind the counter was hard to miss. And Rachel, she didn't fold the note this time. She kept it in her coat pocket close to her heart. Because this wasn't just about a job or a challenge anymore. It was the beginning of something that had taken months to brew. But now it was ready. Warm, bold, honest, just like her coffee. 3 months later, the rooftop ballroom of the Callahan Enterprises annual winter gala shimmered with gold. String lights sparkled like falling stars, soft jazz hummed from a live trio, and champagne towers glittered under crystal chandeliers. At the far end of the room, a massive banner hung proudly. Better every day, a Bean and Birch celebration. Rachel Monroe adjusted the cuff of her deep teal satin dress and scanned the room. She'd never liked galas. Too much flash, too little sincerity. But tonight, it felt different. Tonight, she didn't feel like an outsider. She was no longer the barista from a corner cafe. She was now the head of pilot operations for the new expansion co-creator of the campaign that had doubled customer retention in the test markets, and the woman who had earned more respect in 6 months than some did in 6 years. As she reached for a tiny vanilla panna cotta from the dessert table, a black-suited figure stepped into her path. Nick Callahan, charming as ever, extended a hand. Good evening, he said. Allow me to introduce our strategic partner for customer experience. Rachel laughed. Strategic partner. That sounds suspiciously like a PR safe label for your girlfriend. Nick winked. It's the truth. And it just happens to be excellent PR. A few passing execs paused to shake her hand. Incredible job with the A/B test launch. The tasting events were a hit. Loved the measured by heart concept. Rachel returned every handshake with grace, warmth, and just enough charm to keep it professional. When the band shifted into a slow version of The Way You Look Tonight, Nick turned toward her and offered his hand. Dance, he asked. Rachel hesitated, then placed her hand in his. His palm was warm, just like her favorite cappuccino, seconds after the steam wand stopped. They moved to the dance floor, stepping carefully at first, then easing into rhythm. Nick kept just the right distance, like someone who had learned to respect boundaries the hard way. Do you know, he murmured that coffee consumption on the 18th floor has gone up 22% since you joined. Rachel smirked. Is that a compliment or a data point? Both. The team calls it the barista effect. She laughed. It's probably because your meeting notes are so long they need caffeine to stay awake. Nick chuckled. Maybe. Or maybe it's because you made work feel human again. Rachel didn't answer. She glanced at their reflection in a mirrored column nearby. Her in silk, him in tailored wool moving as one. Her looking up. Him lowering his shoulder always just enough. They turned with the music and Nick leaned in slightly. You make me want to drink coffee for the rest of my life, as long as you're the one pouring it. The words slid through her like heat. Not flashy, not performative, just honest. She blinked slowly, cheeks warming. I only pour for people who listen. He smiled. Then I'll keep listening. Just then, the MC's voice boomed across the room. Ladies and gentlemen, time for our closing game. Mondis vis erbt, may Norbirch cappuccino. Trivia. Laughter rippled through the crowd as a staff member stepped on stage with a thermometer. Final question. What's the ideal temperature for the cappuccino? This couple swears by. Without hesitation, Rachel and Nick looked at each other and said in perfect unison, 144 degrees. The room erupted with laughter and applause. Give them the prize, the MC declared, Nick whispered as he squeezed her hand. Synchronized down to the degree. Rachel shook her head, grinning. Now everyone knows. Let them, he said. But they'll also know you earned everything. As the music picked up again, Rachel leaned in and whispered, that includes you too. And for the first time that night, Nick looked like the one who might melt. The snow came early that year. Outside the flagship Bean and Birch in the Asheville suburbs, the streets glistened in soft white and the air smelled of cedar and fresh coffee. Inside the cafe buzzed with gentle joy, muffled coats, rosy cheeks, and cups steaming like miniature chimneys. Rachel Monroe stood behind the counter wearing a gray scarf Nick had given her 2 weeks earlier. She was training a new barista on milk frothing technique. Tilt the pitcher, gentle swirl. Think smooth like velvet. The machine hissed steam rising in perfect rhythm. Just then, the front door jingled and Nick Callahan walked in, holding a thermal cup with a grin on his face. For the manager, he said, taste test today's roast. Rachel sipped, paused, narrowed her eyes. That's 146 degrees. You noticed? Always do, she said. You did that on purpose. Nick leaned in, voice warm, just checking if you still measure with your heart. The cafe staff stifled giggles as Rachel rolled her eyes and kissed his cheek. That's how it was now. Playful, supportive, and steady. Some days they led strategy meetings together. Other days they hosted tasting events. And once a month, they packed gift sets for local schools and clinics. Free coffee, honest flavor, community first. Nick had stopped seeing reports as numbers. Rachel had started seeing herself as more than just a barista. Together they'd built something real. At the back of the cafe sat a wooden plaque, the 144 table. Staff said it was their spot, their thinking bench, their tasting zone, their compromise ground. If it was empty, Nick was traveling. If it was covered in milk foam and laughter, Rachel had just won a debate. And no matter how cold the season got, inside the warmth stayed constant. Exactly 144 degrees.